All right, in this video, we're going to discuss setting up inventory and vendors for the first time. We're back on the home page. We've already logged back in under our Tesla Electric account. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll see we still have not set up any home builders yet. So we'll go to our inventory tab. And on this one as well, you can see there's not a whole lot going on yet. We're going to change that right now. So the first thing you're going to see here is to be able to add a new vendor. Now, the great thing about REMS is that the materials and the information that you'll be using to estimate is with actual parts that you use on a daily basis. In most situations, when we're wiring houses, we've got a pretty good idea of the materials that we want to use on a daily basis, but not only to estimate with, but also to order with. So later on, once we've made our design, which becomes our estimate, it also becomes our way to determine our parts. The great thing about REMS is it'll allow you to use parts from different vendors into one assembly, and then once we're ready, we can just pull that report up and it'll give us all the different vendors that we need to order from, whether it's in the rough end or trim stage. It'll give us the materials that we need specifically for that house. So what it's going to do is it's going to save you so much time, when dealing with, you'll do that design and then you'll be able to literally just pull that report and have everything right at your fingertips. So the first thing we're going to do is add that new vendor. In this case, we're just going to click on that button, and this is what the add new vendor page looks like, which we're going to just enter some information here. And I'm going to set this as, we're going to call this Crestmore Electrical Supply. We're going to put our contact that we're going to be using at this vendor. Yeah, we'll set a phone number for him here. And we're going to put their email. Now, the one thing about the email to remember is in the reports later, it's going to give you the option when you're sending off that information to send it to the vendor. It will automatically, if this information is put in the correct email line, it will propagate that email to this person for materials to be sent out. So we're just going to finish putting that in there. An address. It will give you a second address line if you need it. In this situation, we don't. And then we're just going to pick our state. In this situation, we're for Iowa. So now we have all this information in here for our vendor. We're going to, then we're just going to click submit. As you can see, REMS has told us that the vendor has been created successfully. You can see now that we have a vendor set up as Crestmore Electric. Now with this, once we've done that, you have a couple different options on here. The first thing is you can either we can click on that edit if we need to edit any of this information we just placed in there. If any of that is incorrect, or you have a different contact at some point, you can just change that information in here. Cancel back out. And from that page, we can click on the vendor itself, which in this page, we'll be talking about that. Let me bring it back out there just for 1 second. And then the other option is it has a quick key to take you just to add an inventoried item immediately off their account. So we're going to go back out to the main page one more time. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to go and we're going to click on Crestmore Electric's name there. And that's going to take us into their account. You can see it gives their vendor information set up on the side so that you know which one you're dealing with. Now, similar to the users that we talked about earlier, you still at this point have the ability to delete this company. Now, once we get to a situation where a vendor has already become part of an estimate or part of an assembly, uh, then that vendor can no longer be deleted. This button will actually change to a disable button because that information has already become part of either the assembly or an estimate or something to that nature. So once that happens, you're no longer able to delete them out of the system because they are part of the software at that point. So just something to keep in mind. Right here we see our inventory list, which right now we don't have any items. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you two different ways to add inventory. The nice thing about REMS is it'll allow you to import a large amount of information at one time. It'll also allow you to export that information out, back out to your vendors later so that they can keep your pricing current for you, the list that you've already made. And then also too, you have the ability to add inventory on a one-time level. Also, you can see that once we have these inventoried items, we can do some searches. We can do filter by if they're in the rough in or the trim stage of material. So first thing I'm going to show you is the add inventory on a one-time level. We can see right here that we have how this looks is that you will put in with the adding the inventory, we're going to put in the part name, what that item cost us, SKU number for your vendor, so when they're pulling those parts for you, they can find them easily within their system. And then we have different styles of measurements. We need in inches, meters, feet, each, roll, case, box, by the bag. So this is going to be more for your information. The one thing that I do want to let you know is that you want to make sure that you set this correct to what the price is. And what I mean by that is make sure that when you're setting that, if that you have this in an each category, that you're talking about that the cost is set to each. We want to make sure that our cost is reflective of our style of measurement. This is important when you're talking about wire, especially. When you're doing, say you have a roll of Romex, you got a roll of 14.2, and you want to make sure that you set this, that the price of that Romex is going to reflect the cost per foot, which is important because when you're building that assembly, you're actually going to have the ability to pick, I'm going to use 15 feet of that Romex, so it'll know that it needs to calculate that it has 15 feet at that price. So make sure that you're matching your unit of measurement up correctly to the cost. Your other options in adding inventory for the first time is that you have the ability to set this for, it's going to be for the rough-in stage or the trim stage. This is important because you're going to want to make sure that those parts are reflective to what stage those parts are going to be pulled in. REMS reports will actually let you pull the report to say, I just want all the material that we're going to use for the rough-in stage, or I'm just going to pull all the materials that we're using for the trim stage. So that is important. Now, there will be a couple different situations where maybe the same part is going to be used for potentially a rough-in or a trim. You want to make sure that that part will actually be, you'll add that into your inventory twice, and then what you'll do is all the information will still be the same, but you're going to set it again to say, but this particular item is the trim for the trim stage instead of the rough end stage. A good example of that is a lot of times you'll send out maybe your a simplex outlet for your sump pump out on the rough end stage, and then you have that same simplex in there again as a trim item for something else. So you want to make sure that you do set that correctly. That's very important. And then the last option that we have in adding inventory would be to select a color. Now, color selection is not going to be severely important. This is more only for your record of what that part is. REMS is not going to pull by the color, and I'll explain that a little bit more once we get going of how to handle that. So that's how that would work, but you don't want to associate it necessarily. That color is really only going to be for your usage only, so keep that in mind. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like to import large amount of inventory. When we click over on the import inventory, you're going to see that it pops up it gives you a couple things on this menu. What you're going to do is you can see, you'll be able to do you'll click this download, and it's actually going to bring you up what REMS needs to put that information in there in a large quantity. You can see obviously it's similar to the other. You're going to have the name of the product, the cost, the SKU number of the part, if it's what type of format of it's in feed or each. The type is going to be based on if it's a rough or trim, and the color is going to be obviously, once again, for your own benefit. So you're going to want to make sure that that information is correct when we do large amounts of different items. And I'm going to show you what this looks like when it's done. So I've already built an entire list of materials, and in most situations, your supply houses will have a good understanding of the materials that you're normally ordering for your residential department. They can give you a list that can be propagated into an Excel worksheet. Once you have that information, you basically just have to cut and paste it from whatever format they give it to you in back over to the REMS formatted piece. So you want to make sure that you can't just use what they have to give you. You have to use the same format that the REMS platform is. So that's simply just by going in and, like I said, hitting that download button. It will give you a template sheet to use for all of that. So what we're going to do in this situation is, let me close Excel just because I have that file open. I might get a little cranky with me here. We're going to close this down. And then we're going to go back into REMS here. Get my Windows button to pop back up. We're going to go and we're going to import that whole list that I just showed you. So what we want to do is just hit the import file, and we are going to bring that information up. We can see here we have that Excel worksheet saved. So we're going to click on that, and it's going to bring that whole thing in, and it's going to upload it into REMS. Here, once you can see that the upload is complete, all that information has been brought in there of all the different items that were added off that spreadsheet. So we can see all those different parts that's being brought in. It'll tell you how many items are actually ready to import. So in this situation, we have 253 items from this vendor that we're bringing in. So once it has brought the upload in, then simply all we have to do is click save. So we'll hit save now, and you'll see that it says waiting, and it'll tell you that when it's completed all 253 items. So now if we go back out to our vendors or our inventory, and click on Crestmore, and now we see that all those items are now added into REMS for that particular vendor. So that's important for building our assemblies later. So now once we've done this too, you can see that you can do searches by part number. It will allow you to bring it up by product name or bring it up by the actual SKU number. So like we'll do this. We'll do PNS in here, and we can filter that. Obviously, you can see that once you do that filter, it shows you all the items that are in the SKU numbers with the PNS tag. So it's a quick way to find different parts that you have to make sure that you have them in an inventory. Also too, once you've got your main list in there, you can simply go and add one inventory item at a time. So we can go back in there and we can just keep adding more and more items to our list individually as well. So, which is nice. Once we've done that too, the last thing that I want to show you that's important is the exportability. With export, we have the ability to export that entire list. So you can see right here that it's downloaded back over to me. And if I were to open that up, it gives me that list back. The great thing about this is when we can basically send this list off to our vendors at any time and say, hey, we need you to check the parts on any of these prices to make sure that they're current. Once they give you that list back, you simply follow the same principle that you already did before, and you would just go back in and say, we're going to add inventory, and we would hit the import inventory and import that new file that they've given us, the updated file. And once we do that, all our prices are updated into our assemblies. And we'll talk about a little bit more. REMS knows when your assembly prices have changed. Maybe not your opening price, but it will know your inventories of when those prices have changed. And so it'll give you a notification telling you that the parts now in the assembly are a different price, so that you can actually go back and see, do I need to change my opening price because our material price has changed? And it'll give you that option of editing that. Once we get into assemblies a little bit more, we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how exactly all that works. So that's the gist of setting up your vendors. And then once you set up that first vendor, you can go in, add as many vendors as you want. There's no limitation to vendors. The great thing about REMS is that we can take different vendors' materials and put them into the same assembly. So whether it's a nail-on box coming from one place and the outlet coming from another, or maybe you're supplying your own wire and keeping it in your own warehouse, REMS will take all those items and put them together. So the great thing is you're using a real number and real materials to build your estimates. And that's just peace of mind for you, that you're not using national averages and different things to that nature. You're using what you use on a daily basis, which becomes important later on when once you get the job, you can literally just pull that report and have that information right in your hands, that this is what I'm needing to order. So that is inventory and vendors. Like I said on the last video, if you do have any questions, feel free to contact us at support@tawconcepts.com, and we should be able to help answer any questions you might have. So thanks again, and watch for the next video. Thanks.